Kia ora, welcome back to What's in Your Kete. I'm your host Jane, and this is part 2 of our kōrero with Paula Conroy and Neke Moa. We have so much still left to unpack, so check it out, let's go. Thank you for sharing your details about your upcoming trip to Munich. Congratulations again. I'd like to revisit your recent trip to Hawaii for FestPAC 2024. How was it? What was your experience like?
Well, for me, FestPAC was really interesting because it was the first time somebody who is not related to me, someone who doesn't know me well, called me a storyteller. So then for my own practice, that's pushed things into a new space that I'm keen to explore and see where that goes now. So that was a pretty amazing take home experience. It was really interesting to see that there are a whole group of First Nations people out there reclaiming stories, tying them back to their land and their people, and there are so many similarities between us, and the reason that we have decided that our stories are so important and need to be retold as agents of change for the nations that we belong to. So indigenous doesn't mean isolated, I suppose, was my take home from FestPAC. So I may have met individual storytellers from separate islands, but collectively as a group, coming from the moana together, well, that was our hapori, and that was amazing.
As an indigenous storyteller and being on their whenua, were there things that additionally inspired you to come home and practice more or add into your kete?
Yeah. It was really quite different because when we first got to Hawaii and we waited for our buses and we got off the plane, we waited for our buses, it was boiling hot, and then we saw a lot of the other delegations as well waiting around for the buses and stuff. And I thought, oh yeah, that's all good. And then we got to our accommodation because it was a shared accommodation at the university. So all of the delegations stayed within those dorms, and it was really awesome actually, because then it meant that we got to know each other a bit more. We went out, we saw each other, we saw what I usually saw what everyone's wearing, what their costumes were, their outfits, their taonga that they brought with them. We sort of stayed in our little groups, but we also were able to, greet each other and see each other daily. And that was really lovely to do that. And then the New Zealand delegation, to see how we came together as a group, because it was the first time that we had come together. And the artists, it was quite distinct groups of course, because there were ones that were there for different activities, events. There was already a lot of politics I felt that was going on, not only just within Aotearoa, but all around. And that was the difference between funding and the difference between who had the haves and the have-nots, because there was a lot that came over that were really poor, really. The fact that they got there on the airfare that they had an airfare and they got there was amazing. And then there was a few, they didn't have accommodation, some of them, even for the next night. Like some of the Rarotongan peeps, they had to go off and busk for their monies, for their next nights, their food or whatever. It wasn't food so much, but it was for accommodation. And just the discrepancies with that. And I saw that how we were really well looked after by CNZ. It wasn't the best of everything, but we were, we had kai, we had buses, we had transport, we had people there on the ground looking after our every need. And that's kind of a thing that I saw. And then I saw that also within Hawaii, and with the homeless people, and with the other Kanaka Māori around the place. They were the poor ones, they were the ones, the homeless, they were the ones with their hands out, and generally just, so that's kind of what I saw, as well as the incredibly beautiful space that we were in. But was my initial, because I was like, you always go somewhere else with your eyes open, I always go to places when I go overseas and really look and see how what the space, what the place, what the feels like. And so kind of that was my first sort of look into Hawaii. Honolulu, really, not Hawaii.
And that, you know what, I thank you for sharing that, because I still think I'm reflecting on the people I met in my time there as well. But that was my biggest takeaway, that for the people I did meet our from all our different nations, was that shared aroha, and for storytelling of our people to collectively come back and to reconnect through the moana. Um, and being there was just, yeah, I don't even have the language to express that. But so I was quite curious to both for your experiences and people you met. Um, Nikki, how about yourself? I know you were one of the CNZ artists that were there, a part of the Roku. Um, what was your experience? Yeah, as a practitioner, as
Yep, so we were at the Hawaiian Convention Centre for the biggest part. So there was a whole 2 floors. For the bottom floor was where all the fale, from where all the everyone had a fale that was dedicated to an island or a delegation. And it was quite a dark. It was like walking into the darkness. It was pretty beautiful and amazing and techno. There was a lot of digital stuff going on. It was pretty full on for your eyes because you had to adjust from this burning hot outside world to this dark kind of space. And I think that was the idea of it, was like going into the night sky and then going across the moana, sort of crossing the moana into these different fale, which were all very beautifully adorned by the different islands. It was really stunning to see, but they were really mainly places for selling their works, their wares, and our the Aotearoa delegation fale. I don't think it was thoroughly thought through enough for enough people to actually be there to person it, to be there every day, and that was a little bit of a downfall for us. But we didn't have the availability of things to sell. Well, we did, but we didn't get that information, so we weren't selling as well as the same as some of the other islands, like Tonga, Samoa. Everyone brought their carvings and their weaving and their t-shirts and all of the things. They were representing also their islands, their communities, by bringing their wares to sell and to take money back to the community and to the islands, whereas we were there mainly for just coming for the events, the fashion show, the poetry, the performances, the dance performance, kapahaka, and then we had a huge exhibition space upstairs, which basically took all of the visual artists, all the mahi for the visual artists, and that's where we actually positioned ourselves to showcase, our toy, our art, our creativity, and that went across. It was quite so it was a very contemporary space, and I don't think anyone had really seen that sort of really beautifully laid out, curated space that had been put together. And so that was really, I reckon, was the really beautiful, shining spotlight. And it was kind of our hub too, whereas the whale could have been a hub, but the exhibition space ended up being the hub, and that's where we always went back to. And, people were just absolutely loved it and adored it. And I could have stayed in that space the entire time. But I actually also spent time over at the Bishop Museum, where there was the carvers had set up and the carving, the men carvers, that is. The wahine were out. There was a bit of a, it was disappointing for me seeing that the carving of that was going on was roped off for tane, for kane only. So that was a bit disappointing, and that it was also our tikanga that had come through was from our side. They had put that tikanga on that whakairo, closed off to Waine, and there was quite a few that could have been in that space helping, or not just helping, carving. Actually, there's plenty of carvers from around the islands, wahine carvers around the islands that could have been in that space. And it shouldn't have even been roped off in the first place. It should have been open. But anyway, that's not my, I'm not there for that. We were on the outside and I was carving with my Chamorro mates from Guam and with our Tahitian wahine, carving pearl, carving stone, carving bone, carving shell. You know, it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and seeing them all, and we were kind of lined up on there with our machines and our bits and pieces, sanding and you know doing all that stuff. But we were on the outer where we could have been part of. But and there was quite a few tani as well had come out, and they were doing like tamoko. There was a lot going on. They were doing a bit of bone carving and some other forms of whakairo, but not the wood, not the rako. So yeah, and the Bishop Museum, stunning, absolutely stunning space. Um, Beautiful to be outside too, instead of inside the in the gallery. So it was spent about I don't know 4 days I think there, carving and hanging out there, talking to people. That's one of the highlights for me is to share. When we go to these like FestPAC, is that's like number one is sharing what we have, what we've been doing, just having conversations with other artists and with the Kanaka Māori. There, I had many conversations with the ones that came into the exhibition, and what I had brought with me was meant to be a connecting. The pieces were really connecting us and Kanaka Māori stories together, and that was through the Atua that I brought within the pieces um, that I'd taken there. And so instantly it brings us into the who, when they saw my pieces, it was who's this, and then I could come into that with the story, and then they related. So it was directly relational. It was building a relationships with the people that came in, but the artwork also took on that role. And so when they saw it, they was like, first of all, I think it's the wow, what's that made out of, or wow, what's that? Because my pieces can be, um, they're quite powerful, they're quite strong in their material, and and then that's probably the first thing that gets people, and then the stories that are embedded within them, and the materials, and also the stories that are told. And so the pieces I took over were about our atua here, but also the atua in Hawaii. Pele was about Pele, Ruaumoko, and Mata Oho and Rua Rakiwai, the sisters that are also known as collectively as Pele. And so bringing those stories together and then hearing some of them, the Kanaka Māori especially, because they seem to just energetically magnetized went to the works that were that were there, and they just were like straight away. And the first person I met, first Kanye I met there, he was like, oh yes, my wife belongs, she's a tohunga, she comes from that Pele. She doesn't, she's not a Christian, religious Christianity, but she, there's not many around now who have those beliefs in our atua. And so that was one of the very first people I met. And so that was a really interesting already relationship and conversation and connection with the pieces. And he was like, oh yes, well she's from Pele, she does, Pele is her atua, and then I'm from Tangaroa. I was like, oh yeah, you're from Tangaroa. So, we already like, I know your atua, you know my atua. We already build that whanaungatanga, we've got those connections because we're so very close to each other. And then sometimes we forget until we start talking again, and then we see it.
Now I'm excited to ask, sorry, Paula, are you able to elaborate a little bit more about the Atua stories and Neke's and those pieces that Neke did take over, and how you see your thoughts on the relationships and that whakawhanaungatanga through Atua. Because while I'm familiar with some of our Atua stories, just recapping what Neke had talked about with Pele, and I do vaguely, I know very small parts of Pele, stories from that, and the relationship and how, how do we bring that back here, and also how do we regroup that or reshare that?
Really amazing and empowering thing for me is being in places like that and speaking with people from other islands, other nations, and we talk about our Atua stories, and someone will say, "We have that Atua, but we call that Atua this name," or "We know that story. We have a story like that." And I think instantly I feel a wee bit braver in my storytelling, because sometimes I'm scared that people are going to tell me that I'm just making it up or it's not true, because for indigenous storytellers, we're often in competition with what other nations and other people from other places have recorded our stories for us, and they've kept for us the stories that they felt would be the most beneficial to our continuing as a nation. Or perhaps they have chosen which stories to keep for us in the way to best manipulate us for their outcome, for their positive outcome. So to be with people who have these stories um, is great. To be telling stories as a Māori from New Zealand, some of the stories I'm telling are for other islands the full stop in one of their Atua stories. So if I'm at the start of the story, I'm hearing Pele did this, Pele did that, then there's a name change, and then we get to New Zealand. I'm going, oh, wow, by the time they get to New Zealand, we are calling them Mata'o and Akiwai, and it's a full stop for other nations who wondered where those Atua went, because sometimes Atua stories, they just end, and then another nation has picked them up, and another nation has taken that story somewhere else. And it's really interesting to see that hundreds of years later, the parallels are still there. The power of oral storytelling, the power of people telling stories around their tables at night, where majority cultures aren't privy to, and that our stories have stayed the same. It's a real privilege to be part of that movement, that powerful movement.
And that's exactly it. You hit it on the head. For me, it is the power in our storytelling, and for my time there, and for the groups of people and conversations I had, I was so excited to just have them and to see the parallel of our stories and our storyline and everything you say there. And I'm like, because this is pre-digital times, pre-written times. It really is the oratory behind that, and so that's why I do ask around your whakaaro on these relationships, because I know there was this, that's the biggest hui of for all of us, and it's the biggest hui I've ever been to for, and such an honor to be there. Like, wow, but that, for me, ultimately, it was that whakawhanaungatanga of us as people, and how proudly just you both have eloquently said it, and the tonga and in the purako, there are similarities.
It was interesting. Being downstairs where the whare were, the first was for me a place of 1,000 emotions. So the first day I was angry, and I had a bit of fight because I was like, who has put all these nations in this dark basement? Why are they here in the dark? Why are they secret? Why can we not see? Because in some of the places it was hard to see the dull lighting. Then the next day was a bit more relaxed, and I was like, oh, and I heard someone say, well, this is luau, this is trading at night, this is evening relaxing, because everybody from their different islands has been busy during the day, busy in the tasks of surviving and trading, collecting food, education. that was happening at the day. This is night. So then I was a little bit more forgiving. Then the next day I started videoing people's feet and looking at the different shoes, because I noticed that for some people that didn't belong to these island nations, they kept these shoes on. And I noticed that there were a lot of people walking around carrying these shoes. So without anyone saying anything, the different cultural expression was right there. And hearing different conversations, so you could hear conversations, people talking about their nation, about their island, about their indigenous spaces that they held. And there are other groups of people coming through to the same event talking about the people from the indigenous nations and about the things that they had seen on their computers or looked up in their encyclopedias, and they had real strong opinions about whether or not the people that were there in their whare were presenting their own nations correctly or incorrectly, depending on the knowledge that they had brought with them. So I found that experience huge learning curve. It certainly taught me to keep my opinions to myself a little bit.
Well, and I thank you actually both for sharing this here, because just like that observation you made with people's feet or footwear, because you are right. I do remember looking, and there were times I didn't want to step into one of the hale. I When I was wearing jandal some days, sandals another day, and that removal of shoes for us as Māori is very important. We know that before we step into a whare for the noa and the tapu. And yeah, interesting. So for me, even then hearing about the tapu and the rope that was placed up at the carving space, and just not even understanding what does tapu mean. I know it means sort of varying degrees through our islands and nations. So yeah, very very interesting in that cultural space. Nikki, for your mahi, did you get any opportunities to speak with the gallerists or people that were that you were wanting to get your mahi in front of the eyes of? Was that a consideration for you on the festival, or what?
No, it wasn't really at all. I didn't really cross my mind to. I sort of crossed my mind maybe someone might be interested in buying something, but and there was a lot of interest. I was the only one in the whole space who had pounamu. Like everyone was like, "Oh, where's all the pounamu at? We're wanting to come in here, And our whale was supposed to be full of pounamu for people to come and buy because that's like number one trade item, really. Nothing else is highly traded as much as pounamu is. And I was the only one who had pounamu in the entire space. Nothing. No one made anything pounamu, nothing. And that wasn't even, I don't think, a consideration for anyone either. CNZ staff, nobody. But that could have been someone, who a shop or a gallery, something could have been in that whare selling lots of pounamu. Because I know, come ones from Rotorua, poor white Jade could have been there selling, but they didn't. And it was, I think, a little bit of a lost opportunity, but I think there was a lot of unknowns, and one of them was selling, because then it was, and my mates from Tonga were like, oh no, they've made us, what was it, the price of, I think you had to have VAT or some kind of tax, and then they put something on top, percentage, the centre had put on a charge on top of all of the sales, so they were really wanting people to buy cash, do cash sales, and then any FPOS transactions were getting snapped by some crazy tax or percentage. So yeah, it wasn't great for them. I don't think selling wise. It was okay. It was, could have been better.
Well, I think things like, apparently there was a rule that nothing was to be priced, and there was to be no talk about sales happening for the first 3 or 4 days, which to me had very little impact to the New Zealand contingency. But for some of those small islands, we saw parts of the other contingencies busking in, for their costs while they were there. And then to see those same hali on the last 2 days selling, trying to sell, because some nations, their villagers had given them things to take to sell. So they'd gifted them an opportunity for them to make money over there to help them with their stay. And it wasn't within their power to sell it because of the rules that they were under. So feedback, I suppose, to the organisation that could have been communicated a bit better.
Do you see that type of hui happening for us here? I'm like not under the FestPAC brand as such. Do you think we have the capacity um, as Māori to actually to host that and or somewhere somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the with the like the Lights Festival, Tairāwhiti, you know, Kahingungu we were supposed to host something, an arts festival, which didn't happen. So it kind of, I guess it depends on who's around at the time and who wants to organise things. But there's definitely, and Māori Art Market, when that's going, that always brings the people, the indigenous in to show what's going on and their rohe and what they're doing, what innovations, what creations, what's going on within Toi Māori. Because there's so much. It's just so diverse.
Oh, exactly. And thinking of Toi Māori, I must quickly jump in and do a huge mihi and shout out to all our whānau that have been involved in Matatini this week. Can I ask from you both, who are you cheering on? Who have you got as the winner? I don't even know the results actually or where we are with things, but
My whānau from Taranaki, so we were winners. We were winners
Yeah.
for the whole week to host something like that. And I could hear myself going, "Oh, is that?" looking in the background, and I'm looking at the people in the high vis tops because they're potentially my cousins. I think Taranaki were the winner on the day.
Yeah. I had to watch Angi too today, and they are amazing. Yeah, but I think I've not. I think I don't. I can't even tell the difference because they're all so high, amazing. I'd say every single rōpū that gets up there is just the next, this high, so high caliber. I wouldn't even know how the judges can possibly distinguish who's the winner because they're just like so polished and their outfits and their tongue. Because I look at their tonga, I want to see who's what are they wearing, who are they wearing, what are they, what are their outfits like? Because that's mostly what I look at, and of course enjoy the waiata and the kapahaka.
and as I watched and listened to a couple of the interviews, I actually thought of you both because as people were talking about the taonga being worn and the sizes of tiki and different tonga. And I thought of you and I thought, wow, I wonder if Nick is watching this. And also, Paula, being a fashionista yourself, I was thinking you'd also be in there with the kakahu, like the traditional wear, the with the pohiri, what everyone was wearing, the beautiful, I don't know, the blouse, the traditional sort of colonial wear of the blouse, the longer piu piu, the vintage sort of pieces uniform. I don't know all the correct terms for it, but just completely beautiful. And yeah, for me, watching that this week was just as incredible as being at FestPAC. But for Māori, for us as Māori, it was just incredible. And I went to this op shop yesterday with a mate of mine down the road, and sure enough, these two young Māori women behind the counter, phones on, up hardcore, watching the matatini there just behind the counter, crack up. And I was like, who are we going for, whānau? Who are we repping? And yep, the girls were in there both debating it and talking about who they liked, what it was, and so choice to see the conversation just in all spaces. And yeah, what a cool thing to have here in Aotearoa. So ngā mihi nui to all our whānau that have been involved with matatini this week. Paula, yes, like segueing back into that. So I met you both at Object Space and that connection of like starting conversations, and I think you and I got talking about Atua stories. I think naturally we fell into that space. And how do you find when you're at these galleries and in the shows and just having these conversations around mahi, like the toy that Neke has made? yeah, how do you flow into these conversations naturally? Because I think you are such a great storyteller and you've got a wonderful knack of finding the energy and the wairua in spaces that are full of people and full of different conversations. So how do you weave in these stories or relationships through your practice?
I'm really lucky to have been brought up with Atua stories. So stories that have for a long time have been called myths and legends. And a myth or a legend will attempt to explain why people do things or how something in a geographical space, how that came about. When I'm thinking about Atua stories, I'm also thinking about how those stories relate to behaviours that people have. And my passion for Atua stories is the total belief that these stories are still relevant today, more relevant. So I really try to find an Atua story that will meet with my targeted market at the time, my targeted audience. So, and I try to find examples within Atua stories that are going to save people time, because I think the message in an Atua story is that our Atua have been around for thousands of years. We don't have the luxury of being around for thousands of years, but we do have the gift of knowing there are hundreds of stories of the journeys, of the relationships they've had, of the things they've done. And if we listen well enough, we can listen to the things that they have done, how they've reacted, and perhaps we can choose to react in a similar way or in a way that's different and save time. I really like to think about Atua and think about stories that have been recorded in times of old, times of past, times that don't exist, and I really want to bring them back as examples of things that can be used today. So I can bore people quite a lot when I'm talking about Atua stories. I'm really passionate about them. So I have a few hundred favourites. But I just think that Atua stories are a really good indigenous way, a really good way for indigenous people to connect with other people and say, in this situation, did you know here's an Atua that did the same thing? So in our current political environment, our current social environment, where I am in my life right now, the second with the people I love are in their life, I really find Atua stories that I can target to that. So if I'm working with Neke and she's looking at for an Atua story, I'm trying to find an Atua story that's really going to relate to the resources she's using, the people she's showing to, the people she wants to be showing to, the theme. But often everything I look at, everything I'm thinking, who's the Atua there? And I think that I have a grandmother to thank for that. So at times with my cousins, we might be arguing a bit. And instead of her saying, do you think she would be doing that? She might say, how do you think Raromia would behave in a situation like this? So I suppose using Atua stories is a very nice example potentially for people who believe in gentle parenting.
For those of our listeners that are on the international scale and from other communities, how do you explain an Atua story, or what is an Atua story for anyone listening who is unaware of the term Atua?
If I'm trying to explain an Atua story, I have to start at self with people and where we are and how we respond to each other. And so we have the constraints of what society wants us to do, what we think we should do, the resources that we have, and the time that we live in right now. And then another part of humanity is our relationship with whānau, with each other. Then we have the part of ourselves that's thinking, making decisions, planning ahead. So these things can be seen. They either can be physically seen, look in the mirror, there you are, look at someone you're talking to, there they are. Discussing things, planning things, that's sort of our mental space that we're in. And then we have another part, wairoa, that perhaps is unseen and private. So for some people, they'll call it spirituality. For some people, it might be soul. For some people, it's a state that they're trying to get into, perhaps through singing, chanting, meditation, relaxing. So for me, in that wider space, I also believe that people have wairoa, and that their wairoa can be living in a wairoa space and is with them wherever they go, experiencing things, helping to bring emotions, mental conditions to them. And within that wairoa space, there are also the memories of people who have passed and gone, and the memory of their wairoa lives in that space still. So a place of memories. It's also a place where, for use of a better word, where deity, their wairoa, would live and would be. So for me, Atua live in a space that is not easily seen. And it's been described as a place where fairies, elves, dragons, taniwha, gods can live. I think that our wairoa, all of these things live together in the same space. So an Atua story for me will begin with an Atua coming from our indigenous creation stories, with the five sisters that created the universe, created the Big Bang, created DNA, created beings, and then those creation become the recorded deity that the missionaries recorded on our behalf. So they are the deity that are responsible for creating trees, plants, behaviours, attitudes, lead people on their journeys to do things, wider space. And then under there you get, in your wider space, you get the development of people who have wider, people who have gone, their wider lives there, and so they leave to us the shape of what we look like when we look at each other, and we might go, oh yes, we know that nose, that comes from, or everyone in that town has that nose. That's a wider gift to us. And then you come to a smaller group and you'll have a smaller part of your own specific family where you've got your own sayings. All these memories are carried within wider spaces. And I just feel that for nations that have gone through a colonizing process, and as now we're intergenerationally colonized, 3 or 4 generations down the track, 5 or 6, for lots of us, we're questioning what our wider space looks like. We're questioning what it means to go back to nature. For lots of us, we're questioning what is it like to be a good person. And I think that Atua stories don't directly tell us how to be good people, because that's the job of our families and people around us in society, but they certainly can give us some good guidelines and give us some really good options that would help us become better people.
Another thing about Atua, because I was like just reflecting on that, what Paula was saying, but also that we live so much with Atua. She's helped to bring them into the present and bring them there into the current space, and we've got to remember they are current. They're not in the past. They're still living, breathing. They're just not within our seeing space. And for most of us, we don't see them. But the tohunga, the place and the importance of tohunga, that is their place, that is their space. And it's such an important place that we have kind of lost that connection with tohunga. We've got lost it because we've also lost a lot of them. We lost a lot of them in recognising that they are tohunga, or recognising their abilities and their capabilities. And so having Paula, who is a tohunga, who is luckily still available to us, thankfully, because so many go through so much mental health problems, so many go through homelessness, and so many go through drug addiction, so many go around, It's a very hard space to be in, the Wairua space, the whole time. When you've got like things talking to you, floating around, seeing things, it's very difficult for those tohunga. And we just put it down to, oh no, they're a bit crazy, they're a bit mental, what are they doing? We don't know. Because we've lost their ability to recognise. And also as a community, we're not supporting the same way we used to when we were, whānau hapu iwi, and we uplifted our tohunga, we cared for them, we created spaces where they could, be there and recognise how difficult it is to work in a Wairua space, and that they're coming into the reality space, and then, it is, those transitions are hard, and I see it with Paul all the time. Those transitions can be really difficult, and sometimes you need your quiet space, sometimes you can't have all of this. You've got to be able to know how to deal with it, and lots of people don't know how to deal with it. So I'm kind of like always happy that she's able to share the stories, and that they are relevant, and that they are real. And I'm here being her biggest cheerleader and going, they are real. We need to have these stories. We need to have this, out there, and for her to be okay to be out there, because going around saying all these things can sometimes people will just go, well, she's just crazy. But, because that's what she says. I know people just think I'm crazy. I said, nah, don't worry about people think I'm crazy. But it's different, because I'm making mahi. My mahi is out there, and I'm putting myself out there with my work, but I'm not going around talking like Paula is. And and it's actually her reality is very different. So that's another level of Atua tohunga, which I talk about, Atua tohunga people, and they're the important connector between Atua and people, and that she is in there.
That's nearly a whole nother podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. He tika tira. I mean, you are a tohunga, and you've made a beautiful relationship there in that. And as Māori, for me, I understand that role that Paula plays in the space. And yeah, like you just said, Neke, that's a really hard space to be in. And also another part of that's why I've thrown out some questions today for you, Paula, to answer, because I do know, what you do, and it's special to have you both sharing. And also, it's special to see. I don't even think the English words even mirror the kaha and the Māori and the Wairua in it too, into your collaboration. For me, it's not a collaboration. I think it's that being, and it's a very choice to have you share those things. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We've got Matariki rest of the year. I'm coming back for that. I'm coming back for this.
I think for me it's about we talk about and approach concepts that people think are extinct or cute, or a thing of the deep dark past, and I really don't believe that they have left a lot of Indigenous people, and I justify that because I look at where so many people are represented in many of the different forms of poverty. So getting back to Hawaii, where people are houseless, not homeless, one word difference, a huge, huge difference in what that means. I am home, I just don't have something to live in. And because society is failing so many groups of Indigenous people in terms of educational poverty, health poverty, financial poverty, then we need to go back to how did we address these things before? And Atua were there before. Māori was there before. Tapu Noa was there before. And I need to, in a tōhunga role, bring those concepts back in a whole lot of different ways. The same messages in a whole lot of different ways, in a whole lot of different flavours for all the different people that need to hear the stories. Our stories are relevant to us because we say they're relevant to us, and that was made irrelevant to us by people who came here who weren't from here, who were pushing their own Atua stories and pushing their own sense of wealth, their own educational, financial wealth and well-being. It hasn't suited us. So we have tried really hard to go forward within a system that doesn't fit us for a long time. It's still not fitting. Perhaps we take a step back and realise that the systems that we had, we still have them. They're there. We just need to scratch under the surface a wee bit. I guess that's the point of the stories.
I think there's been a long time of this talk of loss. And yes, I do, and I understand that there's been a great mourning and a loss of some things. However, for those of us who are very lucky to have whatever it be, I don't think there's a measurement of, of how much we know and how much we don't. For if you know something, you know something. You know who you are, where you are, and that relationship to self, others, whānau, people, community. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it. I see it a lot. Like social media is full of so much. I think everything Māori comes to my Instagram, possible. That's my, what do you call that?
Algorithm.
My algorithm. And so we're getting muckled up. We are our every part of us is out there outwardly, showing our culture, being us, being Māori, outwardly through moko, through tā moko, firstly, because you don't even have to look. You could be white as with blue eyes and you've got some kauai or something, It's people are just standing up. There's a stand to do that, taking a stand, to put that on your face especially, or your whatever, other parts. And then there's all of our kākahu, there's so much kākahu going around now that everyone's just everyone is whakarake ki te ao, adorning, we are adorning, and this is the time of adorning ourselves and immersing ourselves. Everyone wants to come here, learn the reo, ka pai, come to Otaki, go to the wānanga kawa, learn the reo, nowhere. So we're doing that. We're doing all the things that we don't even bother worrying about. Well, we do worry about what the government is doing, what they're all doing, but we really, as community, as iwi, as Māori, we are just, we're going hard on what we want to be looking like, what we want to sound like, our Māoritanga, our mātauranga, our visual arts, everything is really it's booming, This is and you saw it at Matatini, everyone's wearing their gear, everyone's got flags, how can they say it's not a political thing, Matatini? It's absolutely political. It's absolutely there in our waiata, our haka, everything is, it's whakanui a mea Māori. And that's really so awesome to be part of this journey. And then with Paula and her, the stories and the Atua stories, this is the time to be doing it. This is the time for sharing. Because I see so many Atua, so many Mahi Atua, I don't know if you've seen them. There's a lot of wairua things being, wairua stories, things been going around, people going to wānangas, hauora, miri romi romi, there's just so much that we are doing for any part of the community could be part of. And that's even with Auckland Pride, doing the Pride Festival, Takatapui, the whole Pride is run by Takatapui Māori, rangatahi. They are wanting more. We are out there, and the diversity in our community. And then you've got ones that don't want to see us, that diversity so much. Like, even though they're still around, the Destiny Church people, here they are showing off how they feel and their Māori tanga, showing what they think and how they feel, which is just another part of the diversity. Because we're not listening to the crap, but they're there still expressing themselves, and there's good things and bad things about them too. So anyway, we're here, we're there, we're everywhere. That's what I see happening. And now we're coming up to going over to Munich, and that's going to be a whole nother thing again within our own expression of culture.
Ngā mihi nui to my two awesome friends, Paula and Neke. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. If you missed part 1 and would like to know more about what Paula and Neke have been up to, check out the links in the description. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next one.